This property reverts to blood family now. Pack your bags and get out." Raymond's voice boomed through my living room as I stood in the doorway, still wearing my black funeral dress from yesterday. I watched in stunned silence as he directed his sons to carry out my grandmother's antique chair, the one Marcus had loved sitting in while reading his evening newspaper. "You have no right to be here," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the chaos unfolding before me. Raymond turned to face me, his weathered face twisted with satisfaction. "No right? This is family property, girl. Always has been, always will be. Marcus is gone now, and you're not blood. Simple as that. I am Ashley Coleman, 37 years old, and until yesterday, I thought I understood my place in this world. For 8 years, I had been married to Marcus Coleman, a gentle soul who worked as a veterinarian here in Richmond, Virginia. We had built what I believed was a beautiful life together in the Victorian house his grandfather had left him. But as I watched Raymond's other sons, Gerald and Timothy, hauling my belongings toward the front door, I realized how naive I had been about his family's true feelings toward me. The morning after laying my husband to rest, I had returned home from my sister's house to find the locks changed, and the Coleman men treating my home like their personal storage unit. Raymond stood in the center of it all, orchestrating the removal of my life as if I were nothing more than a temporary tenant whose lease had expired. "Marcus wouldn't want this," I whispered, my hands trembling as I watched them stack my wedding photos carelessly on the porch. "Marcus is dead," Raymond snapped, "and he was too soft-hearted when it came to you. We told him from the beginning you were only after the family money, but he wouldn't listen. Well, that charade is over now." The words hit me like physical blows. 8 years of family dinners where I was tolerated but never welcomed. 8 years of conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. 8 years of being treated like an outsider at my own husband's family gatherings. I had endured it all because Marcus asked me to, because he believed his family would eventually come around. Gerald appeared beside his father, breathing heavily from moving furniture. "Most of her stuff is out, Dad. What about the kitchen things?" "Take what's valuable. Leave the rest," Raymond replied without even glancing at me. "She can have until sunset to collect whatever junk we don't want." As I stood there watching them dismantle my life, something cold settled in my chest. They had underestimated me completely, just as they always had. But what they didn't know was that Marcus had never underestimated them at all. My relationship with the Coleman family had been strained from the very beginning. When Marcus first brought me home to meet his parents 8 years ago, the reception was arctic at best. I was a nurse from a middle-class family, someone who had worked her way through school and earned everything I had. To Raymond and his wife Patricia, I was clearly beneath their veterinarian son, who came from 3 generations of property owners. "She's very practical," Patricia had said that first evening, her tone making it sound like a disease. I was helping clear the dinner dishes, while Marcus spoke with his father about expanding the veterinary practice. "I suppose that's important in your line of work." The subtle digs continued through our courtship and into our marriage. They never missed an opportunity to mention the daughters of their friends, girls who had gone to private colleges and came from established families. When Marcus and I announced our engagement, Raymond's first question wasn't about our happiness, but about the prenuptial agreement. "You understand, Ashley, that family property has been passed down through generations," he had said during what he called our pre-wedding discussion. "The house, the land, the practice, these things stay within the bloodline. Marcus is young and romantic, but business is business." Marcus had grown uncomfortable during that conversation, shifting in his chair beside me. "Dad, we don't need to discuss this now." "Actually, we do," Raymond continued. "Ashley seems like a sensible girl. I'm sure she understands the importance of preserving family legacy." I had nodded politely, not wanting to cause problems for Marcus, but inside I was seething. The way Raymond spoke about me as if I were a gold digger plotting to steal their precious legacy made my stomach turn. What they didn't realize was that I had never wanted their money or their property. I had fallen in love with Marcus because of his kindness, his dedication to healing animals, and his gentle spirit. But Marcus saw how his family treated me. He noticed the way conversations became stilted when I joined them, how holiday invitations came with subtle suggestions that I might prefer to work that day instead. He watched his mother rearrange seating at family dinners, so I was always placed at the far end of the table. Most importantly, he heard the comments they made when they thought he wasn't listening. "Son, you could do so much better," Patricia had said one Sunday afternoon while I was in the kitchen. I heard every word through the thin walls. "That girl is nice enough, I suppose, but she's not our kind of people." Marcus had defended me that day, his voice firm. "Mother, Ashley is exactly my kind of people. She's caring, hardworking, and she makes me happy. That should be enough. Happiness is wonderful, dear, but compatibility matters too. Think about your children, your future. Don't you want someone who can truly be part of this family?" The conversation had ended there, but the damage was done. Marcus came into the kitchen afterward and wrapped his arms around me, apologizing for his mother's words, but I could see something shift in his eyes that day, a new understanding of just how unwelcome I would always be in his family circle. The moment that changed everything happened 3 months before Marcus died. We had attended his cousin's wedding, another Coleman family gathering where I played my usual role as the polite outsider. During the reception, I excused myself to use the restroom and returned to find the family huddled in deep conversation about estate planning. "When Marcus goes, the property comes back to the family, right?" Timothy was asking his father. "I mean, she's not actually entitled to anything long-term, is she?" "Don't be ridiculous," Raymond replied, his voice low but clear. "Wives get temporary rights, but family property always returns to blood. It's been that way for generations. Ashley will get whatever Marcus leaves her in personal effects, but the house, the land, the practice, that all comes back where it belongs." Gerald nodded approvingly. "Good. I was worried we might have legal complications with her involved. The only complication," Patricia added with venom in her voice, "is getting her to leave peacefully when the time comes. You know how these types can be when money is involved." Marcus's cousin Walter chimed in. "Maybe she'll remarry quickly and move on." Problem solved. The casual way they discussed my future widowhood, as if Marcus's death was an inevitability they were already planning around, made my blood run cold. But what shocked me most was their complete certainty that I had no legitimate claim to the life Marcus and I had built together. I slipped back into the bathroom and stayed there until my hands stopped shaking. When I finally returned to the reception, I found Marcus chatting with his elderly uncle about new surgical techniques for treating injured wildlife. His face lit up when he saw me, and he immediately pulled me into the conversation. "Uncle Harold was just telling me about the eagle they brought in last week," Marcus said, his eyes bright with professional interest. "Ashley, you remember that case where the patient came in with similar wing damage?" As I listened to them discuss the intricate details of wildlife rehabilitation, I realized how much Marcus's family misunderstood him. They saw only the successful veterinarian who would inherit family property. They completely missed the man who stayed up all night nursing injured animals back to health, who donated his services to the local wildlife rescue, who chose love over their narrow definition of social status. That night, as we drove home, I made a decision that would prove crucial in the months to come. "Marcus," I said carefully, "I overheard your family talking about estate plans tonight." He glanced at me, his expression immediately growing serious. "What did they say?" "They seem very confident about what happens to our property if something happens to you." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over and took my hand. "Ashley, I need to tell you something. I've been putting off some important legal matters, but I think it's time we had a serious conversation about our future. That conversation would change everything." The conversation that night revealed a side of Marcus I had never fully understood. As we sat in our kitchen, he poured himself a glass of wine and took a deep breath. "I've known for years how my family feels about you," he began, his voice heavy with sadness. "I kept hoping they would change, that they would see what I see in you. But after tonight, I realize they never will." "Marcus, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted gently. "Ashley, my family has been planning for your departure since the day we got married. They've convinced themselves that you're temporary, that you'll somehow disappear when it becomes convenient for them." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden we had planted together. "They're operating under some archaic notion that family property automatically reverts to blood relatives when I die. They have no idea how inheritance law actually works, and they've never bothered to ask about my will." My heart began to race. "You have a will?" Marcus turned back to me, and I saw something I had never seen before in his eyes. A steely determination that reminded me he was, after all, a Coleman. "I've had a will since the week after we got married. But 3 months ago, after that conversation with my cousin about his upcoming wedding, I decided it wasn't comprehensive enough." He walked to his study and returned with a folder thick with legal documents. "I've been working with Charles Pemberton downtown. Do you remember him? He handled the Johnsons' divorce last year." I nodded, remembering the prominent estate attorney who had helped our neighbors through a complicated property dispute. "Charles helped me understand something important," Marcus continued. "My family's assumptions about inheritance are not just wrong, they're legally meaningless. When we got married, I immediately changed all property deeds to joint ownership with right of survivorship. That means everything automatically becomes yours if I die first." The weight of what he was saying began to sink in. "But Marcus, your family doesn't know this. They have no idea, and that's not all." He opened the folder and spread several documents across our kitchen table. "I've drafted a comprehensive will that leaves you everything. The house, the veterinary practice, all bank accounts, investments, everything. More importantly, I've included specific language about why I'm making these decisions." He handed me a letter written in his careful handwriting. As I read it, tears began to fill my eyes. "To my family," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means I am no longer here to protect Ashley from your cruelty. For 8 years, I have watched you treat my wife as an outsider, someone unworthy of basic respect, let alone love. You have made it clear that you consider her temporary, a problem to be solved rather than a family member to be cherished." The letter continued for 2 full pages, detailing specific instances of their behavior, their assumptions about property rights, and their casual discussions of Ashley's future. Marcus had been paying attention to everything. "I had Charles witness it and notarize everything," Marcus explained. "I also had him create backup copies to be held at his office. If anything happens to me, he has instructions to contact you immediately." I looked up from the letter, overwhelmed by the thoroughness of his planning. "Marcus, this is incredible. But why didn't you tell me sooner?" His expression grew sad. "Because I hoped I would never need to use it. I kept thinking maybe I could bring them around. Maybe I could make them see how wrong they've been. But after listening to them plan your departure like you're some kind of squatter, I realized they'll never change. So what happens now?" Marcus reached across the table and took my hands. "Now we continue living our lives, loving each other, and building our future together. But if something happens to me, you'll be protected. They won't be able to intimidate you or steal what we've built together. But what about the veterinary practice? Your family will expect—" "The practice is mine, Ashley. I bought out my father's share 3 years ago with my own money. He likes to act like he still owns part of it, but legally it's entirely mine, and now it's entirely ours." 6 weeks later, Marcus was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came after what he thought was just persistent indigestion from too many late-night emergency calls at the clinic. By the time we caught it, the disease had already spread throughout his abdomen. How long? I asked Dr. Williams, my voice barely a whisper. 6 months, maybe 8 if we're aggressive with treatment, she replied gently. I'm sorry, Ashley. I wish I had better news. Marcus took the news with characteristic calm, immediately shifting into planning mode. That evening, as we processed the devastating diagnosis, he called Charles Pemberton. Charles, it's Marcus Coleman. We need to expedite those estate documents we discussed. Yes, it's urgent. Over the next 2 weeks, while Marcus began chemotherapy, we spent our evenings updating and finalizing his will. Charles came to our house 3 times, bringing additional paperwork and ensuring every detail was properly documented. Marcus, I want to add one more provision, Charles suggested during his final visit. Given what you've told me about your family's behavior, I recommend including a no-contest clause. If anyone challenges this will, they forfeit any potential inheritance entirely. Do it, Marcus replied without hesitation. I want Ashley protected from any legal harassment after I'm gone. As Marcus's condition deteriorated, his family's behavior became even more telling. They visited frequently, but their conversations focused almost entirely on business matters and future plans for the property. I noticed them taking inventory of valuable items, discussing which furniture was original Coleman pieces, and making assumptions about what would happen after Marcus died. Ashley, dear, Patricia said one afternoon while Marcus was napping, have you given any thought to where you'll live afterward? This is my home, Patricia. I plan to stay here. She exchanged a look with Raymond. Well, of course, temporarily, but long-term, you'll want to find something more suitable for a single woman. This house is really too large for one person. Plus, the upkeep is expensive, Raymond added. Family property requires family resources to maintain properly. I bit my tongue, remembering Marcus's words about not revealing our legal preparations. But their presumption was infuriating. They were already mentally redistributing our life together, treating me like a temporary caretaker whose services would no longer be needed. The worst conversation happened 2 days before Marcus died. Gerald and Timothy came to visit, ostensibly to see their brother, but I overheard them in the hallway making plans. Dad wants to start moving some of the valuable pieces out before the funeral, Gerald whispered. He's worried Ashley might try to claim them. Smart thinking, Timothy replied. We should probably change the locks too, just to avoid any complications. What about the veterinary practice? Do we need to notify his patients about the transition? Dad's already contacted that new vet in Henrico. Dr. Peterson is interested in taking over the client list. I stood frozen outside Marcus's room, listening to them plan the dismantling of our life while my husband lay dying just feet away. They had no idea that every word they spoke was further validating Marcus's decision to protect me legally. That night, I told Marcus what I had overheard. He was weak from the pain medication, but his eyes still flashed with anger. They're already dividing up our life, he asked, his voice barely audible. I'm afraid so. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, then looked at me with determination. Ashley, promise me something. When they come, and they will come, don't let them intimidate you. You have every legal right to everything we've built together. Charles has all the documents, and he knows exactly what to do. I promise, I whispered, holding his hand. And don't feel guilty about fighting them. They've made their choice about how to treat you. Now they'll live with the consequences. Marcus died on a Tuesday morning in October, surrounded by the golden light filtering through our bedroom windows. I held his hand as he took his final breath, whispering how much I loved him and how grateful I was for the life we had shared. The funeral was held 2 days later at St. Paul's Episcopal Church, where we had been married 8 years earlier. The Coleman family took over the arrangements, pushing me aside as they planned what they considered appropriate for their son. I let them handle the details, knowing that soon enough, their presumptions would catch up with them. Ashley, dear, you'll sit in the second row. Patricia informed me the morning of the service. Family sits in the front row. I nodded quietly, choosing not to point out that I was his wife, and therefore his closest family. Their behavior was providing me with even more evidence of their complete disregard for my place in Marcus's life. After the service, Raymond pulled me aside at the cemetery. We'll give you a few days to grieve, Ashley, but then we need to discuss practical matters. The house will need to be cleaned out, and we'll need time to prepare it for Gerald's family. Gerald's family? He's been wanting to move back to Richmond, Raymond explained matter-of-factly. The house is perfect for them, and it keeps the property and the family where it belongs. I stared at him, amazed by his audacity. Raymond, that house is my home. Was your home, he corrected. You were Marcus's wife, and we're grateful for the care you gave him. But now it's time for family property to return to family. I am family. Raymond's expression hardened. You're not blood, Ashley. There's a difference. That night, I stayed at my sister Janet's house in Glen Allen, needing space to process my grief without the additional stress of the Coleman family's expectations. Janet, who had never liked Marcus's family, was furious when I told her about their plans. They can't just kick you out of your own house, she exclaimed. You were married to Marcus for 8 years. They seem very confident about their legal position, I replied calmly. Well, they're wrong. You need to call a lawyer immediately. I smiled sadly at my sister's outrage. Actually, Janet, Marcus already took care of that. The next morning, I drove back to Richmond, planning to spend the day at the house gathering my thoughts and beginning to sort through Marcus's belongings. But as I turned onto our street, I saw Raymond's truck parked in our driveway alongside Gerald's van. I sat in my car for a moment, watching through the front windows as figures moved around inside my home. They weren't waiting for permission or discussion. They were simply taking what they believed was rightfully theirs. I pulled out my phone and dialed Charles Pemberton's office. Charles, it's Ashley Coleman. They're at the house now, moving things out. Are you there? I'm sitting in my car outside. They don't know I'm here yet. Perfect. Don't go inside alone. I'll be there in 20 minutes with copies of all the documents. Do you remember what Marcus told you to do? Let them dig their hole deeper, I replied, recalling Marcus's exact words. Exactly. The more presumptuous they are, the clearer it becomes that Marcus was right to protect you legally. As I waited for Charles to arrive, I watched Raymond direct his sons like he was overseeing a construction project. They were loading my grandmother's rocking chair into Gerald's van, the chair I had inherited from my mother's side of the family. That's when I knew the time for politeness was over. I got out of my car and walked toward the house, ready to face whatever came next. I stood in the doorway of my own home, watching Raymond orchestrate the removal of my life with military precision. Gerald was wrapping my grandmother's china in newspaper, while Timothy loaded Marcus's favorite reading chair onto their truck. You're back sooner than expected, Raymond said when he noticed me, not even having the grace to look embarrassed about being caught looting my house. We thought you might want to stay away for a few more days while we handle the transition. The transition? I asked quietly. Getting the house ready for Gerald's family. Don't worry. We'll pack your personal items separately. You can pick them up once you've found somewhere else to live. I watched him for a moment, marveling at his absolute certainty. Raymond, I need to tell you something important. What's that, dear? You forgot one crucial thing. His expression shifted slightly. What do you mean? Before I could answer, Charles Pemberton's silver BMW pulled into the driveway. Raymond's face went pale as he recognized the prominent estate attorney stepping out of the car with a briefcase full of legal documents. Mr. Coleman, Charles called out as he approached the front door. I'm Charles Pemberton, Marcus's attorney. I believe we need to have a conversation. I don't understand, Raymond stammered. What's this about? Charles looked around at the furniture being loaded into trucks, then back at Raymond with professional calm. It's about the fact that you're currently removing property that belongs to Ashley Coleman, and you need to stop immediately. Gerald dropped the box he was carrying. What are you talking about? This is family property. Actually, Charles replied, opening his briefcase. Legally speaking, everything you've touched today belongs to Ashley. Marcus left a comprehensive will, and I have the documentation right here. Timothy stopped loading the truck. A will? But family property follows legal ownership, not assumptions, Charles interrupted. And Marcus made his wishes very clear. Charles spread the legal documents across our kitchen table while the Coleman men gathered around, their confident expressions rapidly changing to confusion and then anger. This will, dated 6 months ago and properly witnessed, leaves everything to Ashley Coleman, Charles explained methodically. The house, the veterinary practice, all bank accounts, investments, and personal property. Everything. Raymond's face turned red. That's impossible. Family property has been passed down for generations. You can't just give it away to outsiders. Mr. Coleman, your son owned this property outright. He could leave it to whomever he chose, and he chose his wife. But she's not blood family, Patricia protested. Charles pulled out another document. Actually, under Virginia law, spouses have automatic inheritance rights that supersede any family traditions. But more importantly, Marcus also changed all property deeds to joint ownership with right of survivorship. Even without the will, everything would have gone to Ashley automatically. Gerald looked stunned. You mean we have no claim to any of this? None whatsoever. In fact, by removing property without permission, you're technically committing theft. The room fell silent except for the sound of Patricia's sharp breathing. Raymond slumped into a chair, the weight of his miscalculation finally hitting him. There's more, Charles continued, pulling out Marcus's letter. Marcus also left detailed instructions about why he made these decisions. He began reading aloud. To my family, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer here to protect Ashley from your cruelty. For 8 years, I have watched you treat my wife as an outsider. As Charles read Marcus's words, documenting years of subtle and not-so-subtle mistreatment, the Coleman family's faces grew ashen. Marcus had been paying attention to everything. Every slight, every dismissive comment, every assumption that Ashley was temporary. Furthermore, Charles continued, Marcus included a no-contest clause. Any attempt to challenge this will result in the forfeiture of any potential inheritance. Raymond finally understood the full scope of his son's final act of protection. Within hours of Charles's revelation, the Coleman family faced the complete collapse of their assumptions. Raymond was forced to return every item they had removed, including my grandmother's chair, that had somehow ended up in Gerald's van. The locks they had changed were replaced at their expense, and they were banned from entering the property without my explicit permission. The veterinary practice that Raymond had already promised to Dr. Peterson remained mine to operate or sell as I chose. The family land they had considered their birthright was now permanently outside their control. Their casual planning sessions about my departure became evidence of their complete misunderstanding of both legal reality and Marcus's true feelings about them. Patricia's hopes of maintaining her social standing were shattered when word spread through their social circle about how they had tried to steal from their deceased son's widow. Gerald's plans to move his family into the family house evaporated, leaving him to explain to his wife and children why their promised new home was no longer available. Timothy's assumptions about inheriting part of the veterinary practice cost him the job he thought was guaranteed. Most devastatingly for Raymond, the respect he had commanded as the Coleman family patriarch disappeared overnight when people learned how thoroughly his own son had rejected his values and protected his wife from the family's cruelty. The man who had spent decades lecturing others about family loyalty discovered that his son's final act was one of complete rejection of everything Raymond represented. As I stood in my kitchen that evening, holding Marcus's letter and surrounded by the belongings his family had tried to steal, I realized that my husband's greatest gift wasn't the house or the money. It was the validation that our love had been real, that I had been worthy of protection, and that sometimes the quietest people fight the hardest battles for those they love. The revenge was complete, not because I had planned it, but because Marcus had seen his family's true nature years before I did, and had quietly, methodically, built walls around our love that they could never breach.